Each time, not the time. They attack their computer. Don't attack the computer. I do what I want. Alright, well, don't attack the computer. I do what I want. Fuck.
What the hell is it not working?
Whoa, don't do that, you biter. How about you? How about you too? How about, no. How about you?
Ugh. Dude, I wonder if I even have that. I bet you I don't. It's okay.
Hey, why are you biting me so hard? I don't want pain. I don't want pain that hurts. I'm biting my finger now.
Peach, stop that. Could you just spit, Lucky?
You're purring. That's a growler, purr.
MRG_live. Said. G.
Mr.G, 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 he's your average teacher, gone idle streamer. Mr.G, 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 Mr.G.
Oh, Peachy, you take a big sure you live my lip, huh? Oh, my Peachy, 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 Peachy. A Peachy, Peachy, Peachy with the Peachy, the Peachies. Come on, Peachy. Wow, you're so cute. With the Peachies and Peachies. Peach.
Wow, so it looks like we're gonna go live. In 7 minutes.
Not on the computer. Okay. That's not, Paige. You know the computer. Mr. G.
Careful, Peach.
Peach, no, don't go crying, don't go boom. Peach, why you do that? I know what I won't.
Mr.G, 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 he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr.G, 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 he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Americana writer, got no education. I spent him while streaming on a Hawaiian vacation. Unworn and white, Levi's wearing covered this
Mr. Who?
Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer.
MRG_link said, anyone here?
Mr. G. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Americana writer, got no education. I spent him while streaming on a Hawaiian vacation. Unworn and white, Levi's wearing covered this week. Until he covered them with coffee and creamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G,
Okay, Peach.
Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer.
said, Mr. G.
Hey, Moza.
Was__. Said, G-Bang.
Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, 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 Mr. G,
No, she works with
Was__.
this.
Said, YouTube stream is not online yet.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't get that YouTube stream on.
Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Americana writer, got no education.
Was__. Said, hope you had a lovely Christmas, Mr. G.
Thanks, Moza.
Until he covered them with coffee and creamer. Mr. G, Mr.
Careful, Peach.
Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, he's your average teacher, not an IRL streamer. Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G, Mr. G,
Stream
he's
Elements.
your average teacher, not an
The new
IRL
purchase here, PogChamp, check it out. https://merch.streamelements.com/mrg_live.
Mr. G,
When you got that face tattoo, I was so inspired. I got a picture of them on my right butt cheek.
Me too.
Said, help Mr. G with the donation through Stream Elements. https://streamelements.com/mrg_live/tip.
Except I got EBZ on my left butt cheek.
Try hard bands. Said, sweet. School is back in session.
Well, school actually starts tomorrow. This is just a special Sunday night thing. I'm gonna drink some wine and read my book. Or something like that.
M.R. Brandt, sir. Said, why won't you stream in the category? M.R. Brandt, sir. Said, we all know. Try hard bands. Said, headlines matter. ___. Said, CDC button.
All cats are good. Cats. Welcome to, I'm Mr. G. Welcome to my classroom. This is
M.R.
an
Brandt, sir.
official class.
You look like M.R. Beast after he falls off the wagon with that mustache.
Oh, that's nice. I'm not Mr. Beast. I'm Mr. G. It says it right there. Okay, VIP, Mr. G. Alright. So, class, this is a special stream. Really, I just want to test out my audio mics, but I do plan on doing a long-form reading of my book. But I wanted to use the specific mics, and there won't be any free TTS either. So I guess while I have you guys here, take a listen now for a minute, and then I'm going to try to plug this in, and tell me if you see any of you hear any difference in how it sounds now and how it sounds when I plug in the microphone. But right now, welcome to my classroom. I hope all of you are having a wonderful holiday weekend. Every holiday there's always a top movie that comes out around Christmas. I think this year's movie, is a Disney Pixar movie. Those are always really popular. Everybody knows Toy Story, right? Well, this year's movie, I was informed by a viewer of the program, a viewer of the stream, a member of the classroom, Cody, saw this movie Soul, and he said that this movie, the main character was a teacher named Mr. G who liked cats. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and the guy kind of looks like me in a way, except that he's black. But the main character, Joe. Well, I thought it says Joe's dream is to be a jazz musician. Well, I thought the character's name was Mr. G from what I heard, but I don't know. So I guess, there's that. Oh, what's he do? Hey Google, Play Beethoven, please.
Playing Ludwig van Beethoven on Pandora.
So I was trying to go on YouTube and Twitch here, but it wouldn't let me for some reason. I've been trying, it won't let me go on live on YouTube with this Mevo camera. I don't know what. Something is up with the settings or whatnot. So, I have been uploading on my second channel. I uploaded 2 videos on my second YouTube channel. So, there's that. I ran out of wine. I've been drinking a glass of red wine every night. But this is not nighttime really. It's pretty early here in Hawaii. It's only 5:40 in Hawaii. But that is evening.
Said, would you consider being in an intimate relationship with Airsoft Fatty?
I don't know who that is. I'm not interested in being in any relationship. But I don't really like your tone, so I'm not going to give you many more breaks here, Mr. Grant, sir. So,
Try hard bangs.
hey, try hard bangs.
This guy been rude the entire day.
Yeah, I think might just go ahead and ban him. Or I'll give him one more chance. So, this is without the microphone right now. And then I'm gonna plug in the microphone and tell me if you notice a difference. I'm gonna put this on. Hey Google, pause music. Yeah, it's purple and green. Weird. Let's see if it turns red. I guess I could read the instructions. Check, 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 test, test, test. Test, test. Alright, now how does it sound now? Can you still hear me okay? Does it sound better before? You should be able to hear me very clearly. Can you hear me very clearly? Is it loud? Loud?
Try hard bangs. Said, not much of a difference, Professor.
That's because it's not working right. I don't have it set up correctly. Try hard. See, look, there's no difference between now and then when I unplug it. It's the exact same, right? Alright, so we'll just work on that later. Okay. Alright, hey Google, continue music. Hey Peach, come here Peach.
Come here. Come here. Come here, son. Ah, this is the beautiful Peach. Peach, she's like, no, don't make me out.
Okay.
Try hard bangs. Said, Peach looking good. Muzza __. Said, Peach.
So I'm just gonna grab a copy of my book
Said,
and we'll go right
Mr.
into
G
it.
with the donation through
I also have some slides planned for my reading.
s://streamelements.com/mrg_live/tip.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's go ahead. Get some of this on. All right. Okay. Let me just go ahead and add a couple things here.
Mr. Brandt, sir. Said, when was the last time you
Listen.
spoke to Britain?
my birthday, September 24th, and I hadn't spoke to him for a while before that either.
Steve Wonderino said, Mr.G can't read.
So, this is the cover of my book, Gonzo Education. Alright. Go and remove one of these, I think. Okay, hey Google, turn it down a little bit. So this is my book, Gonzo Education. I actually have, this one is autographed in blood, my own blood. So this one was cost more than $25.99. We'll continue. We'll go ahead and start from the beginning, chapter 1.
M.R. Brandt, sir, said, Satanic book.
So, chapter 1. Hey Google.
__, said, Block S.
Hey Google, turn it down. Turn it down.
Nightman said, you can send Mr. G Moses and key audio packages to 1170.
Chapter 1, Let's Be Homeless.
37305, Honolulu,
Hold on one
Hawaii,
second.
96823. Steve Wonderino said, 666.
Chapter 1, Let's Be Homeless. In 3rd grade, the worst thing you could grow up to be was a garbage man. Lots of kids wanted to be doctors and lawyers, but if one 3rd grader wanted to insult another 3rd grader, he'd say that they were going to grow up to be a garbage man. As an adult, I see my peers were wrong with their assessment. Garbage men get paid good money and receive excellent benefits. In most cities, they have support of a union which guarantees them job security and a living wage. My life would have been easier, but much less interesting, if I would have been a garbage man. Okay, now while I'm doing this, I realize that this free TTS isn't really going to work, so. Hey Stevie Wonder, what the fuck is with that last comment?
Said, you look like Luigi.
Luigi, well, I got a younger brother named Mario. He's the short one and I'm the tall one. The first time I was homeless was when I was 16 in 1996. My fraternal twin brother, Michael. My fraternal twin brother, Michael, and I were having problems with our father. But we've been dealing with his shit since we were 4 and had pretty much gotten used to it by this time. Our mother wanted custody, but her schizophrenia caused a nervous breakdown shortly after we were born. We were her second set of twins. Our 2 sisters were born 4 years earlier. The odds of a woman having 2 sets of twins is 1 in 700,000. I don't know what the odds of a woman having 2 sets of twins and schizophrenia is, but I'm guessing it's pretty low. Our father made it clear he wanted nothing to do with Michael and me the second we met him, at age 4. We never called him Dad, or ever had a conversation with him. We didn't know what college he went to, what part of New York he was from, or how many brothers and sisters he had. We lived in his house for 10 years, but he was a stranger. Most of our childhood he made us sleep in a tiny closet in the garage. He should have been thrown in jail for some of the things he did. All we knew was that he was a university professor who didn't like us. He was nice to our sisters. They were named after girlfriends he had before Mom. He lied about his age to them, said he was younger than he actually was, and told them that he never lost a tooth, even though he wore a full set of dentures. He didn't seem to mind our sisters, but he reminded Michael and me how much he despised us almost daily. Around the time we turned 12, he told Michael and me he was going to kick us out on our 17th birthday. That day was coming, but like millions of other kids around the world, we'd spent our whole life surviving on this planet with very little help from him. Having one less asshole giving us shit on a daily basis was in our best interest. One day, Michael got into a huge fight with him over a driver's ed course he took without his signature. We said about 20 words to him the entire time we lived there, so not having him sign a piece of paper shouldn't have been a big deal. The reason our father was so pissed was because Michael had paid for the class on his own, with his own money. That weekend, we were supposed to go on a road trip with our door-to-door newspaper sales crew. We've been working the job for over 2 years, longer than anyone else. Our crew boss, this old alcoholic named John, had planned a weekend sales trip to Corpus Christi, Texas, but when our father found out Michael took a driver's ed course without his permission, he said both of us couldn't go.
Hey, Peach. Peach, you're not supposed to climb that.
Paige is like,
Who are you talking to?
The physical part of their battle happened in the front entryway. I had a good vantage point from the top of the stairs. Our father never went upstairs, so it always felt safe. I'll show you a picture of the entryway in a second. I watched the whole ordeal but didn't get involved. I remember the fight starting vertically, with both of them yelling in each other's faces like baseball players. When Michael tried to walk away, our father forcefully grabbed his arm. Michael pushed him away, and our father was shocked. Neither of us had ever stood up to him like that before, so he grabbed my brother by the throat and threw him on the entryway floor. Then he got on top of him and put all of his weight on Michael's chest and whispered nasty things that parents should never say to their kids. I remember the foam building up around the brim of our father's mouth and watching it as it slowly dripped down and onto the side of Michael's cheek. The only thing Michael could do was close his eyes and try to avoid emotional scars. Hey Google, turn it down. The incident had a profound effect on me and my brother's psyche, and we were never quite the same. It was the final moments of our brief childhood, and neither of us would ever try to make an emotional connection with our father or any other authority figure again. At the time, I didn't quite understand the implications. I just wanted to go on a road trip with our friends. Our newspaper boss, John, was going to be in front of our house honking for us. In a minute, there would be a van chock full of delinquent teenagers in front of the house. Michael was fighting for both of us. I didn't have the guts at the time, but my brother did. Our father's treatment toward us was the strongest bond that we shared. He always spoke to us as if we were one person. He didn't talk to us much, but when he did, he'd refer to us as you boys, and never called us by our actual names. Mom was in and out of the Kerrville State Hospital when we were growing up, a state mental institution, and we hardly ever saw her. She lived across town, worked 2 jobs, and was on a ton of medication. She said we were the most important thing to her, but the only affection we got from her, or from anyone else for that matter, came in the form of a weekday afternoon or every other weekend. That's if she wasn't committed to the state mental hospital. The majority of our childhood we spent alone in a cold garage with no toys, parents, or guidance. We learned about the world, how people spoke, and society's manners from neighborhood kids and cable TV. Their fight probably only lasted a few minutes, but it felt like forever. They wrestled around the entryway floor until Michael finally slipped away and ran for safety in the front yard. Our father wasn't going to continue being violent if the neighbors could see. Most of the families in the vicinity of our house had been reporting our father to social services for a wide variety of reasons for years. Our sisters would prep us on what to say in order not to get him in trouble. It was the only time any of them were ever nice to us. Don't tell him about the puppy that got hanged in the backyard. Or don't tell them that you boys live in the garage, they would tell us. Seconds after Michael ran outside, our newspaper boss, John, pulled up to the house. Michael wiped his tears and jumped into the van like nothing happened.
I went outside but hesitated to get in. I walked to the driver's side window to talk to our boss. John asked what was going on, and I told him that our father said we couldn't go on the trip. John swung his head around to glare at Michael, already comfortable in the back of the van. John knew our father was an asshole. On more than one occasion, he tried to start a conversation with him when he was picking us up or dropping us off. John just wanted to tell him I was the crew's top salesman and breaking all the sales records. Our father was always rude, and refused to speak with him or even look in his direction. John always took the high road and never responded back or got salty. I stood by the van, not really knowing what to do. The rest of the crew had already been picked up. Jonathan, Benny, and all the other guys were shouting, "Get in, Greg! Come on, let's go!" I couldn't let them down. I was their crew sales leader, the crew leader, and the most important person. At that moment, I decided to make an adult decision and not let my friends down. I looked back at the house and saw our father glaring out the window. He was seeing if I got in the van. He wanted me to get in. It'd give him a reason to change the locks, bolt the windows, and make sure neither of us ever stepped foot inside of his cold-ass house again. So that was from my book, Gonzo Education. That was from chapter 1. And this is some innovative shit right here. You're not going to get this from fucking Tom Wolfe or Nancy Clemens or even Stephen King. So if any of you were listening then, which maybe you weren't, I was talking about the scene in the house. So guess what? I have the actual house right here. This is 2322 Quail Hollow. This is the front entryway of the house. Where Michael ran outside. This is my vantage point. This is exactly what I saw when I looked up at the house and saw my father glaring out. Here, I'm going to turn on the free text-to-speech, and, I guess we don't have that many people here, but if any comments about the reading there, I can go. I would appreciate that. So yeah, anybody want to comment? So that's the actual house, and I was talking about the fight area. This is the actual entryway. This is the entryway where the fight happened. The fight area, like I described, was on the marble floor. It looked a little different then. These are new owners, but this is where their fight was, where they were rolling around. And I was at the top of the stairs. If you see that, the stairs goes up. And then, obviously goes over to the right. So from the top banister up there, I was able to look down and, like I said in my book, have a bird eye vantage point. This is the front door of the Quail Hollow house where Michael slipped out during the altercation. And he ran out to these trees in the front yard here of our Quail Hollow house. He ran out there, as the safety area because it was right by the neighbors, and the neighbors couldn't see. And then John went and pulled up to the house. So, all right. So I showed you that right there. Now I'm going to go and but now. Right. So, that was your chance to speak. This is going to be re-uploaded on YouTube. So if you're watching it on YouTube, thank you. Because if you're watching it, then you're obviously my automatic feeder. So Peach loves to run and catch it as it's coming out there. Whoa, careful guys. He's just like, this is my thing. Alright. So, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, then go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And also there's a link in this description for my book too. I don't know, this is putting things in perspective. Like, and a mustache is too. I'm saying the mustache. I've never had a true mustache before, but it is put things in perspective. This is my book. It has nothing to do with any of those other streamers or anything. If you're watching
if you're from them, then that's, you're in the wrong channel. You know, has all to do with me. I will never write about those people, ever. And, you know, this is a grown-up thing. I'm really glad that there's not that many people watching, too. Like, you know, like, this isn't a garbage trash thing. I'm not going to be taking shots and doing shitty stuff with shitty technology, you know. It's going to look good, the production value. It's not going to be like... Alright, anyways, we're going to continue reading a little bit more. And like I said, there's a link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. This is my book. Gonzo Education. Working on the sequel right now. But as you can see on the screen, it's available on Amazon and on Walmart.com. So continuing. John and I agreed to meet at Dairy Queen later. He'd take the crew to sell a few in-town subscriptions and then come and pick me up. I watched them drive away and felt a pang in my stomach. My life was about to change. For the first time, I felt the stress of being an adult. I didn't go back inside. This is when I moved out of my house. The reason this is significant, because at this young age of 15 years old, I never see my father again. I see him one more time in my life. And I never get any help from anybody, and I'm on my own from that point on. So, you know, I see people in Hawaii in particular, where they live at home into their 20s, into their 30s, and then they talk smack, you know, to somebody like me. Like, you know, I've been working on my own since I was 14. So, continuing. I walked to the Dairy Queen Mom used to take us to. The only other time we got ice cream was when our father would buy a half-gallon of pecan praline. And I hate pecan praline. My plan was, there's a lot of pecans in Texas. My plan was to call the house when we got to the motel in Corpus Christi. Our father would have already gone to sleep, and I could leave a message on the machine saying I was staying at a friend's house. When I got to Dairy Queen, I ordered a Butterfinger Blizzard and ate it slowly. I wasn't hungry. I kept thinking about what happened. I couldn't get the image of our father beating Michael out of my head. My memory is like 1950s flypaper, catching things I'd rather not want to continue to see. Here, oh man, Peach must have spilled some wine. I threw away my Blizzard, left Dairy Queen, and went to the barber shop Mom used to take us to. I looked inside and thought about what it would have been like if Mom had custody. Our father never once paid for a haircut, took us to the doctor, the dentist, or even bought us any toiletries. Without Mom's help, things would have been worse. I left the barber shop and still had time to kill, so I walked around the street to the elementary school we used to go to. We had fond memories there, and when we got older, we'd still meet our friends on the basketball court there a few afternoons a week to shoot hoops. I took my time strolling around my little kid's stomping ground and reminisced. I felt 100 years old, but I was 16. It was Friday afternoon and there was no one around. I was isolated and alone. I walked by the swings, the monkey bars, and the soccer field, conjuring up what felt like distant memories from recess and lunchtime. After it got dark, I went back to Dairy Queen and spotted John pulling up with a van full of screaming teenagers. Michael was sitting by himself in the corner. He didn't drink back then and was solemn and quiet with a few noticeable scratches and a blue bruise under his left eye. All the other kids were acting exactly how you expect a bunch of smashed kids who were about to go on an unsupervised road trip to act. It was like Lord of the Flies, and the only adult there had already tossed back 20 beers. I got in and John asked me to drive. How about we let Michael drive instead, I said. Whatever, dude, I'm drunk, John replied. Michael got behind the wheel, John passed out in the front passenger seat, and the few other guys fished currency out of his metal pants pockets while Michael drove us to the Texas coast. The trip wasn't as fun as it normally would have been because of what happened before we left. I never called our father from the motel and was nervous the whole weekend.
I didn't sell as many newspaper subscriptions as I usually do, and I couldn't relax. I had no idea what our father was going to do when we got back. I didn't do anything wrong, but Michael had finally stood up to him, and whatever response he had was going to be big and for us both. I started to feel sick on the Sunday night drive back, and John had to pull over so I could throw up. Michael, on the other hand, didn't seem very concerned and said I was worrying over nothing. "What are we going to do if we get kicked out?" I asked. "We'll just live in the woods or Jonathan's backyard," he said. Jonathan was another kid in the newspaper crew who started about the same time we did. He was pretty much a loser before he met us, a clone of his wannabe gangster sister. Michael and I introduced him to weed, Nirvana, and Marlboro Reds. "If it doesn't work at Jonathan's, then we can just stay with John," Michael said. "Yeah, that'll be fun," I sarcastically told him. "We'll live with John, his wife, and their 3 kids. John dropped all the other kids off in the crew first before heading to our house. He drove up the hill leading there slower than usual. Our father was an early riser and a deep sleeper, so if we got back late enough, there'd be a chance he'd already gone to bed and we could sneak inside and go to school the next morning like nothing happened. Just before we were about to get out of the van, John told us if our father started getting violent with him, then we should come back outside and go with him to his house. "I'll just have to talk to my wife," he said. John said he'd be waiting outside and to let him know how it goes. "So we can just stay with you?" Michael asked John. "Well, I'm not even going to try to get in then." I was a kid, not really sure what was going on, but I knew I had an algebra quiz the next morning and I wanted a little sleep. John and Michael said they'd wait in the van to see if I got in okay. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't want to get in any more trouble than I was already in. The house looked hollow. The street name was Quail Hollow. Like nobody lived there. I tried to open the front door, but it was locked. Our father never gave us keys, so this wasn't unusual. I jumped the fence and tried the back, locked too. The final option was always the second floor bedroom window, so I shimmied up the side of the house, jumped on the roof, and tiptoed over there. I tried to push the window up, but it wouldn't budge. I looked closer and saw a long wooden board blocking it in place. Our father took every precaution to make sure we couldn't get back in. I went back to the van and told John I couldn't get in. Neither him nor Michael was as surprised as I was, but I see nothing of me and my father. During the drive to John's, we told him we didn't want to go to high school anymore. John thought this was a good idea and saw high school as something that got in the way of selling newspaper subscriptions. So this was the point in my life where I actually dropped out of high school. Yes, I consider education as something very important, but this book is about graduating from the University of Texas Journalism School after dropping out of high school. That's why it's a book. I didn't just go to college and write a book about it. Fuck that. I did something that more people have gone to the moon than have dropped out of high school and graduated from the University of Texas Journalism School. That's the best way to put it. I think 12 or 13 people have gone to the moon, have set foot on the moon. Less than that have dropped out of high school and graduated from the University of Texas Journalism School, which has only a 10 to 15% acceptance rate. And to get into that school, you have to either be the editor of your high school newspaper or an editor of another college newspaper, because they have the most widely circulated newspaper in the United States. So just to put that, what this book is about, it's about education, that's in the title. It's about my education, it's about Mr. G's education, but the point of the book is what I did to obtain that education. And just like a good story, the protagonist, he has something to accomplish. And when he accomplishes that, during the climax and during the resolution, he understands that what he originally intended and what he originally thought he was going to obtain, he didn't. He did obtain it, or maybe he didn't, but during that he learned something that he wasn't expecting. So yes, I ended up graduating, so the protagonist does accomplish his goal, but in doing so, as I explained in the last few pages of this book, in doing so, the protagonist, myself, realizes how it was all for naught. He realizes what is really important, in life. So, continuing. So, during the drive to John's, we told him we didn't want to go to high school anymore. John thought this was a good idea and saw high school as something that got in the way of selling newspaper subscriptions. Dude, if all you want to do is score with some perky broads, wait until you get to college because all the girls put out, John said. John was the first adult who told me I could still get into college without finishing high school. Dude, a GED is just as good as a high school diploma, he said. You can get a master's, a PhD, whatever. Can I still go to the University of Texas? I asked him. I want to go to UT in Austin and major in journalism. Sure can, dude, and you're getting a head start with the newspaper business, he said in his high-pitched sales voice. If you go the community college route, you go get your basics, make a few good grades, meet a few broads, and wham, you're on your way to UT. John gave honest advice. Greg, you're a smart kid, that's obvious, he said. It's not about having smarts on the inside. It's about taking what you have and applying it. Do something with your brain, dude. I could tell John believed in me, one of the few adults who did. Hey, Lucky. Staying at John's house was awkward. It was obvious his wife wasn't happy. They already had 3 kids and didn't want to add 2 delinquent teenagers. However, their kids enjoyed our company. His 2 young boys liked to practice their wrestling moves on Michael, and their little girl pretended I was a singer in her favorite boy band. Our first night there, I got in trouble when John caught me flushing pot seeds down their new low-flow toilet. I'd never seen him so pissed and got uncomfortable while he scolded me in their family bathroom like I was one of his own kids. I couldn't look him in the eye and stared at his tacky Snoopy bath towels placed neatly by the sink. He couldn't believe I'd brought marijuana into his drug-free suburban house. This was the same guy that would buy us prostitutes, right? John was treating me like a child, and kids hate that. For the first time, I didn't know how to react to him. He didn't seem like such a close friend anymore. If we were at work, riding in the van, and he tried to throw this authority bullshit at me, I would have told him off and we might have gotten into an argument or even a fist fight. But now, he was acting like someone I couldn't talk back to or be myself around. After that night, I knew we couldn't ever live comfortably at John's house. It would have changed everything. John had 2 worlds, the clean and tidy world in his suburban subdivision with his family, and the down and dingy underground one he shared with us in the newspaper crew. The next day, Michael and I went to Jonathan's house and told him we were homeless. Jonathan enjoyed our company. We were basically his only friends, so he let us live in the shed in his backyard. He said all we had to do was stay out of sight from his mom, but even if his mom had caught us, she wouldn't have really cared. It would have been something interesting for her to talk to her coworkers at the water cooler at work. We were originally going to live in the backyard of another friend from our newspaper crew, Benny. Benny was a lot cooler than Jonathan and lived in the same neighborhood. Benny also had a shed in his backyard. Benny invited us to sleep there, but he was mainly doing it just for a nice gesture because his parents were always home. His father was a nocturnal 80-year-old, I talk about Benny's father later in the book, who wandered around their house all night. His mom only worked a few nights a week at a seafood restaurant, so she was always there too. Benny's dad didn't mind me and Michael hanging around, but his mom was a notorious bitch for hating the neighborhood kids, especially me and Michael. Benny and his brothers had a lot of friends, and Jonathan didn't have any besides me, Michael, and Benny. Benny's backyard would not have worked out because there were always people coming over to use their pool. Jonathan was 15 when he stopped going to high school and started working for the paper. Benny was 13. Jonathan was a latchkey kid whose single mom would let him get away with murder. Despite growing up in a poor household, he had feelings of entitlement and expected life to be easy. John acted like he was better and smarter than everyone else, also a product of his mother's babying. Jonathan's mom was losing her importance to her son, but she was determined to be his friend first and parent second. They were close, and John would come to her with problems, but that was because there was no risk of discipline. She was the type of mom who'd buy her kids beer on a Friday night. She knew we smoked pot, but she didn't say much about it and actually gave Jonathan money to buy it. She tried as hard as she could to be the cool mom, well-informed, but not judgmental. Michael and I were finally on our own, teenagers full of optimism about our future and the wonderful things it held. For a couple weeks, we slept in the shed in Jonathan's backyard. But after our mom heard, she convinced her husband, Guy, to let one of us stay in an empty room in their house. Michael was having a harder time with homelessness than I was, so he went to live with them while I toughed it out a little longer. Mom married Guy when Michael and I were in 3rd grade. None of her 4 kids liked him very much, and we all questioned her for settling. Michael was the only one that had a conversation with Guy. He was an accountant who had a bunch of side hustles like selling Amway, betting on horses, or working at the flea market on Saturdays. "I don't want to be alone," Mom would always say. Guy was a huge man, about 6'4" and over 300 pounds. He was mostly fat. He had a Texan accent and spoke with a lisp, but he hardly ever said more than 2 words. Guy took the city bus every weekday to his lame accountant's job. The kids in the neighborhood would throw rocks at him and call him Fat Frankenstein. Benny had an ongoing joke where he'd constantly try to be friendly and make conversation with Guy. Guy always ignored him and just quietly growled. A few times Benny would wait until he knew Michael and I weren't home before knocking on the door for Guy. Mom would answer the door and say, "Michael and Gregory aren't home." Benny would smile, wink, and then turn on a Texan accent, just like Guy's. "I'm not here to see them. I want to talk to Guy." Then he'd see Guy mulling around the background in his underwear, and Benny would try jokingly forcing his way inside. "Guy, I see you. I want to buy some Amway, Guy. Come here, Guy." Guy may not have said much, but he made plenty of noise with his burping, moaning, flatulence, and heavy breathing. He was like a sad, retired, ailing circus bear that was never much fun to begin with. My first stint of homelessness wasn't that bad. I went to work every day. I spent most of my time with good friends like Benny, and I always had money in my pocket. For the first time, I didn't have teachers or parents telling me what to do. With no rent or bills to pay, I figured everything I'd heard about life being difficult was just old people talk. It wasn't hard to sneak around Jonathan's house and avoid his mom. Michael and I had years of practice sneaking around our father's house for as long as I could remember. We never got fed enough. Michael even resorted to eating cat food and dog food. He still eats it today. But we usually just took turns sneaking into the kitchen to grab food. Sneaking down those stairs that I just showed you earlier in this stream. I was at Jonathan's house every day, regardless, so if I ever ran into his mom, it wasn't that big of a deal. We were used to our friends' parents not liking us. It'd always been that way. Nobody wanted their kids to hang out with the dirty Brandt brothers who had to steal to eat. It took Jonathan's mom about a month to figure out I was camping in her backyard. Her schedule made her easy to avoid. She was out of the house early every morning and wouldn't get home until late afternoon. By that time, we would have already been picked up by John and off selling newspaper subscriptions in some far-off South Texas location. At the end of the night, John would drop me and Jonathan off last. There was always a gang of other kids to get home, so most nights we wouldn't get back until close to midnight. Jonathan's mom would be asleep, and even if she wasn't, we'd just go to the woods, the arcade, or down the street to Benny's backyard. Benny's dad didn't mind if we smoked pot. "Heck, I remember we used to smoke the bark off the trees," he'd say. Benny's 80-year-old dad. A month later, Jonathan suggested he ask his mom if I could move in their garage. He said his mom liked me and he could convince her to say yes. She charged me rent, but it would be cheap. Before I moved in, his mom sat me down and told me what she expected. I agreed, and the next day we cleared out their garage and set up with a bed, air conditioning, and cable TV. The best thing about the place was the private entrance where anybody could come and go at all hours. I had the coolest hangout in the hood, and the deal even came with a new family, a fridge full of munchies, and 3 spirited dogs. The one stipulation with me living there was that I had to get a real job and quit working for the newspaper. Benny was working at the original Fuddruckers hamburger down the street from Jonathan's house, so I decided to work there. It was kind of depressing. I made more money and it was a lot more fun selling papers than it was flipping burgers. I pulled at least $400 a week working for John, but I was lucky to make $200 a week every 2 weeks at Fuddruckers. Lucky for me, Jonathan's mom only charged me $80 a month to live in her garage. Shortly after I moved in, I was arrested for the first and only time in my life. It was just after I turned 17, so I was convicted as an adult for breaking into a vehicle. Luckily, Texas had recently downgraded my crime from a felony to a misdemeanor, and I didn't have to stay in jail long. I made a short film about this. It was on my original YouTube channel, which got taken down. Hopefully that channel will be, put back. The probation officer made sure I was under constant supervision and gave me as hard of a time as he could. When I wasn't visiting my PO, I'd be performing the unreasonable amount of community service I was given, where I did backbreaking labor at a park digging ditches for 8 hours straight for free in the hot Texas sun. I still hung around the same crowd and everyone still smoked pot. My friends weren't quitting on my behalf. They didn't care if I was on probation, and they did everything they could to get me to keep smoking. One time I woke up in the middle of the night with Benny blowing a huge bong hit in my face before a drug test. My 6 months of probation seemed like a death sentence. When you're a teenager, 6 months is an eternity. I didn't know how I was going to survive without smoking pot. Hanging out with my friends and smoking weed was my identity at the time. Identity is the most important thing to a teenager. I wanted to continue to do it, but I needed a substitute, so I started using alcohol. There were lots of stores who'd sell alcohol to minors back then, so every morning I'd wake up, walk to the corner, buy a 40 ounce of malt liquor, and drink it with the hobos in an abandoned parking lot across the street. Certain people shouldn't be on probation. In December of that year, I found out my probation had been revoked, and I was to begin serving a 2-month adult jail sentence at Bexar County Jail and their zero-tolerance boot camp facility. Adversity comes in bunches. Right around the time I found out I was going to jail, Jonathan's mom found the pot garden her son and I had been cultivating in the backyard. The plants were my idea. I was on probation and couldn't smoke weed, so I figured the least I could do was grow some for my friends. Jonathan's mom would have been okay with the plants, but she was also stressing out because of her son's new girlfriend. Jonathan had recently started dating an attractive woman much older than he was. He just turned 16, but his new, very serious girlfriend was 37. Yeah, and he was dating her when he was 15, too. He met her at our local neighborhood crack house. It wasn't what you expect when you hear the term crack house. Hey, Peachy. It was a decent house in a middle-class neighborhood that looked completely ordinary if you were ever to drive by. The caretaker was a middle-aged junkie named Tona. Tona lived down the street from Benny. One day, one of her friend's kids was playing basketball in her driveway. It was actually my first girlfriend's little brother. Benny asked to join the basketball game, and when Tona came out to introduce herself, Benny pulled her aside and whispered, "Do you smoke marijuana?" Everybody loved Tona. She was in her 30s but acted like a teenager. Tona had an endless amount of beer and weed for us kids. There were plenty of hard drugs used there, but she did a good job keeping all the heavy stuff in the back room away from anyone too young to handle it. All day, different races and ages would come and go from Tona's house. Some were there to buy drugs, some were there to see Tona, and some just wandered up from the alley in the street. The television was always on, and Tona only watched MTV. This was back when the station played music, so it served as an excellent backdrop for all the drug use and interesting characters that frequented her living room. Tona had a huge crack addiction, and I saw firsthand how drugs can destroy someone's vision of reality. She smoked rock, but when she wanted to change a pace or get really high, she'd inject it into her foot. Sometimes I'd help her find a tourniquet and open vein. Her husband, Harry, always kept her supplied. We were lucky to have a friend like Tona, and we'd spend almost every night either at her house or Benny's backyard drinking her beer and smoking her weed. Tona hooked us up. She was one of the most generous people I've ever known, but cocaine seems to do that to some people. Tona taught us very useful things, like how to control our boozing and drink all day. She also taught us how to roll joints with $1, open imported beers with a lighter, and use the stove to light a cigarette. All of this would come in handy later in life. Tona gave us insight into the adult world she knew we'd encounter. In return, we gave her attention. Tona was an agoraphobic drug addict who liked people around her constantly. The only time she left her house was when she had her crackhead husband drive her across town to drop her off at her crackhead boyfriend's ghetto apartment for a few nights. Her day revolved more on who would come over and what would happen in her living room, rather than where she went or what she got accomplished. Tona's husband, Harry, was old, in his 70s or 80s. He was a crackhead too, but he wouldn't start using until he got off of work. He reminded people of John Wayne. Their relationship revolved around their drug use. Harry met Tona when she was working at McDonald's, her first and only job. I never saw them nice or romantic with each other. It was all about the drugs. Tona was 40 years younger than Harry and played the part of his daughter in their sick relationship. Harry's real daughter refused to speak to him, understandably so. Harry was the sole breadwinner with a small rose business he owned and operated out of their house. The roses he sold paid for their mortgage and crack. Every morning he'd wake up early, drive to a rose farm, and buy a bunch of flowers wholesale. At night he'd take attractive girls around in his old Cadillac to the sad San Antonio dive bars and strip clubs. His rose girls would then approach the bar's inebriated patrons and ask them to buy a flower. Harry's rose business supported their lifestyle and enabled them to live in a decent house. There were sexy women in their living room every night. Nothing's better when you're 16 than smoking pot and drinking beer with curvy dames in short skirts and elaborate blouses. Most of the girls working for Harry were only interested in money, so the last thing on their mind was a teenager. But one girl stood out. Janet from another planet was a dark-haired beauty with hair like electric space. She'd been working for Harry off and on for a few years. Most of Harry's girls would spend the majority of the night in the back room doing hard drugs, but Janet stayed in the living room and smoked pot with us kids. She hardly even drank. When the other girls would be behind closed door doing dirty things for money, Janet would be in the living room watching MTV and hitting our homemade bong. Janet fit in with our group. We didn't think of her as 37. She was older than Jonathan's mom, but hanging out with Janet wasn't anything like hanging out with Jonathan's mom. We were a breath of fresh air for her, Janet too. She had gotten tired of all the aggressive jerks she'd been meeting at bars and strip clubs while slanging roses for Harry. Janet was planning on hooking up with one of us from the start. She initially wanted me, obviously, but I knew nothing would have ever worked out with us. Jonathan, on the other hand, was ready and willing for a relationship and wasn't bothered by their age difference. Janet was an incredible person inside and out, and no one blamed Jonathan for hooking up with her. He was definitely dating out of his league. John's mom was the only person who had a problem with their relationship, and it didn't necessarily have anything to do with Janet or who she was as a person. The problem was that Janet was older than she was, and she felt like she was being replaced. Janet would smoke weed with us in the woods or in Benny's shed every night, but John's mom would never do anything like that. His mom might buy us beer, but it was always forced and awkward. The biggest difference was that Janet spoke to us like equals, and that's the best way to earn someone's respect at any age. There's a big difference between someone who drinks and someone who smokes weed. With weed, you can drive a car, study for a test, or operate heavy machinery. With alcohol, you can't even walk in a straight line or make complete sentences. No one has ever died from pot, but on average, 6 people die in the U.S. daily from alcohol poisoning. Jonathan's mom drank and Janet smoked weed. Janet was a well-grounded person enjoying her life, and Jonathan's mom was swimming in cheap wine while trying to control her dopey son. Speaking of wine, I'm going to take a drink of my wine. Let's see how many pages are left here. So we have about 7 pages left. I think I can finish this chapter. I don't want to get it on my nice white shirts.
Good. Okay, continuing. Jonathan's mom used the pot garden as an excuse to not only kick me out, but also show her son just how much she disapproved of his relationship with the older woman who she refused to meet. Youth doesn't fathom how bad things can get, and the future always feels like it's going to be great. Jonathan and I figured this whole homeless thing was going to be a grand experience. When I look back, I see that he had no reason to worry. Even though we both joked about the fact that we were now bums, Jonathan was never really homeless at all. He was just humoring me. The only thing on his mind was his new girlfriend, and now he had an excuse to move in with her. We left his mom's house and walked to the woods we'd spent many times hanging out in before. It took an hour for his weakness to show, saying he wanted to call Janet and tell her what happened. "I'll be back in a minute," he said. "I'm just going to run to the payphone across the street." I waited in the cold and the optimism I had faded. A bolt of nervousness hit me when I realized he was going to ditch me in the woods and stay with his girlfriend. Being young and homeless is not something you want to do alone. At that moment, I realized the world is a much colder place than I had ever thought it was. I finally got a grip of reality and how much it relates to my happiness and well-being. Everyone has that moment in their life when you realize how many people actually care about you. When Jonathan finally got back, he had an incredibly dumb look on his face. He strolled up to where I was sitting at the woods and wouldn't make eye contact. Instead, he made silly comments about the weather while blowing into his hands for warmth. I asked him what took so long, but he wouldn't answer. There was a brief moment of silence before I stood up, looked him in the eye, and asked him if he was ditching. "Listen, I know you're not going to want to hear this," he said, "but it's obvious that you're just jealous of Janet and me and you want what we have." John Boy was more confident than I'd ever seen him before. "Here's the deal. You're either with me or against me, and if you're against me, then you can go screw yourself." I didn't know how to respond to my best friend. I honestly didn't care about him or his 37-year-old girlfriend. I had the more immediate concern about freezing to death in the woods. I kept my cool, took a breath, and asked, "Well, if I'm with you instead of against you, does that mean I can go to Janet's house too?" Jonathan threw his hands up and yelled, "No, this is exactly what I mean. You just want what we have. You're jealous." I was upset but didn't show it. It wouldn't have been practical. I told Jonathan I'd wait for him until his girlfriend showed up, keeping hope he'd change his mind and invite me to come to the warm house too. When Janet finally pulled up on the road adjacent to the woods, she didn't bother getting out of her truck. Jonathan ran out to the street and shouted, "Laters," without turning around. When they drove away and were out of sight, I let out my pain. I screamed and shouted and kicked some innocent trees. When I finished my tantrum, I sat on a rock and noticed how sweaty I'd gotten from the exertion. I took my jacket off and concentrated on each cloud of smoke my breath made. 20 minutes later, the sweat on my body turned cold and I began to shiver. My legs started to get numb and I was showing signs of hypothermia. I thought about knocking on Benny's window, but then I realized he was on vacation in South Padre. So I limped to the only apartments nearby and stumbled around its buildings until I found a closet, a patio, or a hole to crawl inside. I finally found the apartment's laundromat, but the door was locked. So I climbed up a ledge and jimmied open one of the windows before using the last bit of strength I had to pull my freezing body up by my forearms and slide inside. I landed plop on the laundry room floor in a warm room with a comforting laundry smell. There was a slight radio playing in the background that added to my feeling of well-being. I crawled under a table, slid behind a trash can, and fell sound asleep. I woke up a few hours later to the sound of an early riser doing his laundry. He didn't say anything or tell me to leave, so I rolled back into a ball and continued sleeping. A few hours later, I slithered out to the street. The sun came out from behind the clouds, and I felt relieved to have survived my first freezing night outside. It freezes about 15 nights a year in South Texas and San Antonio. This was one of those nights. I didn't know where to go from there, so I wandered around the neighborhood I grew up in like a lost dog whose families moved without telling him. I finally ended up by some railroad tracks that weren't near any streets, people, or businesses. It was the best place to hide the shame of being homeless and unloved.
For the rest of the day, I wrote poems about being beat and alone by the railroad tracks. At the time, I had a maudlin notion of one day writing a great book. I watched the freight trains go by, and I tried to figure things out. The only people you ever saw by these railroad tracks were stereotypical homeless people, the kind with shaggy beards, filthy hands, holding cardboard signs, standing on street corners. I hung around the tracks alone for a few hours. I didn't write any great poetry, but I did find a piece of aluminum foil that had a half-burnt bowl of pot still in it. I smoked the weed, meditated, and tried to find some sort of purpose or direction in life. Getting high put me in a better mood, and I was actually able to laugh about my situation. Later that afternoon, I noticed two bums slowly walking toward me. I got a little nervous and began to plan out what I was going to say. It felt like high school all over again. When they got closer, I realized I actually knew one of them. It was a bum I'd smoked with named Kenny. Kenny was one of the only few transients who hung around Jonathan's neighborhood. He chilled with a lot of non-homeless people because he didn't look that homeless, just poor. Kenny was a little over 30 and had a deep East Texas accent that matched his southern mullet, which he always kept combed. He wore decent second-hand clothes, free from cigarette burns and masturbation stains, and always carried a comb and toothbrush wherever he went. It's easy to give up on that kind of stuff when you're living on the streets, so you gotta respect someone who keeps himself upright despite sleeping rough. You okay, Lucky? The first night I met Kenny was a week after I moved into Jonathan's garage. It was cold outside and he didn't have anywhere to sleep, so I let him crash on the floor. I figured I was doing the right thing. Before that night, whenever I went to sleep, I'd take my wallet, keys, and whatever else was in my pocket and put it all in one of my shoes. But the night I let Kenny stay with me in my garage, I woke up the next morning with exactly half the money in my wallet gone. Since then, I always sleep with my wallet safely snug on my ass. I put Kenny's previous deception in the past because I wanted someone to talk to. I've been babbling to myself by the railroad tracks all day. This is normal for me, but many men have gone crazy doing the same thing. Kenny was happy to see me, but the guy he was with looked at me the way that they looked at tax collectors in biblical times. I spent the rest of the afternoon with my two new homeless pals. Kenny was cool and talkative, but his friend stayed silent with a mean look on his face. Kenny's friend was an ugly old man with warts and missing patches of skin. He kept staring at me and licking his lips, which made him even more creepier than he already was. I made every attempt to convince him that I was okay, but nothing seemed to work. When it got dark, Kenny invited me back to their camp. I had no logical choice but to accept. They knew I had no money, so I wasn't that worried about getting robbed. Their site was about a mile away, hidden in between a patch of bushes and an abandoned warehouse. There were beer cans, cigarette butts, and human excrement scattered all over the place. They'd obviously been there for some time. Kenny lit a small fire while I found a piece of cardboard to lie down on. I used my backpack as a pillow and tried to get comfortable. It wasn't as cold as the night before, and I felt pretty good. I thought of myself as a homeless cowboy under the Texas stars. Humans have been sleeping like this forever, I told myself. Kenny and his friend drank bush beer while I pretended to sleep. I was tired of their conversation. It was fun for the first hour, but I didn't want to have to keep on thinking of things to say to these stupid bastards. Whenever the conversation got quiet, it felt like something bad was about to happen, to me. When I finally convinced them I was asleep, I realized what was going on. Kenny had some crack that he was planning to share with his wart-covered friend. This is why his friend had been giving me the stink eye all night. He was waiting for Kenny to break out the candy, but Kenny didn't want to pull it out with me around. The fire sizzled down and it got colder. I heard the sound of crinkling cellophane, but I continued to pretend to be asleep. I may have been homeless, but I knew smoking crack wouldn't have been a good idea, at least not at this point in my life. After the drugs kicked in, they started being incredibly loud, so I sat up and lit a cigarette. Nobody could pretend to sleep with the commotion they were making. Kenny's dirty friend saw me smoking a cigarette and started screaming, "He's awake! He's awake!" "Yes, I'm awake," I responded. Kenny ran over and started stuttering. We were just, he couldn't think of anything to say. "I don't care," I yelled. "I just want to get some sleep." Then I actually did fall asleep, but I woke up at sunrise with Kenny's friend lightly kicking my side. He was screaming at me to hand over the rock. Kenny tried to calm his friend down, but the guy was cracked out of his mind. He thought I'd gotten into his bag and pocketed some crack to smoke later. The man was having delusions that I wanted no part of. It was a far cry away from my Caro-esque ideas of writing poetry by the railroad tracks. I had enough, grabbed my stuff, and bolted like a track star. I knew both of them were too old and out of shape to follow, so I ran away as the faint yells of Kenny bellowing me to "Come back!" faded in the distance. When I got far enough, I slowed to a jog. Other than having to carry my huge backpack, it was a peaceful run. It reminded me of track meets in grade school. After the first mile, I saw familiar territory and realized I was only a few blocks from Tona's house. I was hungry, tired, and relieved to see somewhere I'd been told I was always welcome. I figured I'd tell Tona about the bums at the railroad tracks and she'd have a good laugh. Tona always loved my stories, but when I got to the edge of her street, I felt a weird vibe coming over me. Something wasn't right, like I shouldn't be there. I'd been there 100 times before, but this time something felt odd, like I had done something wrong. I rang the doorbell, but nobody answered. I heard the TV on, so I knew someone was home. I knocked loudly until someone finally came to the door. I expected to see Tona, but instead Jonathan appeared with a mean look on his face. He opened the main door, but kept the screen door shut and spoke to me through the wire frame. I was surprised by his coarse behavior and asked him what was going on. He stiffened his brow, looked me square in the eye, and firmly said I couldn't come inside. I was stunned. "Where's Tona?" I asked. "She's not home," he said. I know this was a lie because Tona never left her house. "Look, Jan and I are watching the place for her until we get our own place," he said. "I know what you're trying to do and it's not working." I felt betrayed by the few people I thought were my friends. I was hungry and alone, and it would have been nice to go inside somewhere. However, I'd been turned into the villain while I was playing bum at the railroad tracks the night before. I found out later that Janet and Jonathan had moved into Tona's extra bedroom and told her I was trying to ruin their relationship and tear them apart. I left Tona's house and walked to the end of the street and then to the end of her neighborhood. I felt weak, lightheaded, and hadn't eaten in a while. I wanted to avoid going to Mom and Guy's house before I went to jail, but I needed food. Mom lived about 5 miles from Tona's driveway, and on an empty stomach, I knew it was going to be a long walk. But I figured it'd be worth it to get some food in my belly. I needed to go somewhere where someone gave a shit about me. My twin brother Michael was the closest thing to that I had. There's only 3 more pages, 2.5 more pages of this chapter. Good stuff. During my walk, I figured I'd ask Mom if I could stay a few nights before I went to jail. I wasn't asking for much, and they knew I'd be gone soon. I was actually looking forward to jail. 3 hots and a cot sounded better than anything I had going for me at the time. I'd called my probation officer to see if I could move my surrender date to a couple weeks earlier than originally planned. I'd do my time, move on with my life, and get out of homelessness. The life of a vagabond wasn't as romantic as I thought, and the only thing I could think about was finding somewhere to live and something to eat. I took my time walking to Mom's, taking plenty of breaks and stopping at a couple different parks for water. When I got to her house, I sat in the driveway for a couple hours before knocking on Michael's window. He was up late working on his artwork, and Mom had already gone to sleep. Michael said he felt lucky they were letting him stay there, and he didn't envy my position. The last thing he wanted was for me to mess things up for him, so I couldn't come inside, but he said I could hang out in the backyard with their smelly-ass dog, Elmo. He said he'd bring me some food and covers. It was the best offer I had. An hour later, he came out with a blanket, a radio, and some stale hot dog buns. Early the next morning, when Mom and Guy left for work, I broke inside for more food. I made a peanut butter sandwich and laid my sad bones on their couch, falling asleep to the sounds of The Price is Right. I slept on their grungy couch for a few hours before getting up and calling Mom at work. I told her I was going to call my probation officer and start serving my sentence early. I asked Mom if I could stay till then. She was sympathetic, as usual, and heartbroken to see her oldest son going to jail. She told me she'd try to convince Guy to let me stay a few nights. Guy let me stay for a week, but he said I had to be gone from morning to midnight and make sure to confirm my new surrender date and get my ass to county jail ASAP. I called my probation officer the next day and explained my situation before asking if I could go to jail early. I want to get it over with, I told him. The officer was surprised and told me something like, well, I guess you could turn yourself in early, but you weren't scheduled until the end of the month, so I don't know why you would. Even though I had elucidated the tool about my hard-knock circumstances, he wasn't sympathetic. He should have told me that turning myself in early wasn't going to help anything. I was due to be transferred from jail to the zero-tolerance boot camp facility on a particular day. If I turned myself in early, I'd be volunteering to go to jail for no reason. This is what it's like not having a father in your life. Or if I had a decent male figure in my life, maybe he could tell me, hey, don't turn yourself in and go to jail early, dummy, you know. The officer said he needed a moment to think it over. He called me back an hour later and said, yeah, sure, you can turn yourself in early, but I can't guarantee that you're going to get out of jail and over to boot camp any earlier than they expect you. During this time in Texas, probation officers felt their job was to get as many people in jail as possible. Every life knocked out of whack was considered a victory. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world, and at this period they had the highest incarceration rate in the country's history. So basically it was the highest incarceration rate of the last 500 years of anywhere in the world. The majority are there for non-violent drug offenses. Possession of marijuana is the most common offense. According to the U.S. Bureau of Justice, in 2008 there were 7 million U.S. citizens in jail, prison, or on probation. That's about 1 in 30. Since 1980, the prison population has quadrupled. A large reason for this is because mandated sentences which came about during the war on drugs. But the increase comes during a period when crime is dropped by 25%. I had a few days of rest in Mom's house before turning myself in. It was nice to eat, sleep, and talk to Mom before I got locked up. She was worried, so I reassured her that I was going to be in the safe part of the jail. Not true, I was in the most dangerous part. There'd be guards watching us and no one was going to try to beat or rape me. Also not true. People did try to beat and rape me, unsuccessfully. I showed her how many push-ups and sit-ups I could do and she was impressed. Do what they tell you to do and they'll let you come home, she said. That's how she talked. Yeah, home, I said sarcastically. I took the bus to the downtown jail, but the guards thought I'd made a mistake and didn't want me to let me in. So I explained my situation. They looked at me like I was crazy. I started to get upset that I wasn't welcome in jail and told them to call my probation officer. After 2 long hours, they finally put the cuffs on and showed me to my room. For the next few months, I was locked in cages with hardcore felons. I'd never be the same person I was going in. Most kids my age were finishing high school, going to prom, and planning their graduation party. I was learning about violence, crime, and sociopaths. Most of the inmates I was forced to interact with would spend their lives in and out of the system, never contributing much to society. I may have been young, but I knew these weren't the type of people I wanted to be around. It was hard to grasp exactly how I got there, but this was my life, and it was up to me to do everything I could to improve it. That was from my book, which I'm exceptionally proud of. Like I said, I graduated from one of the top journalism schools in the United States, the University of Texas School of Journalism, and I'm very proud of that. I dropped out of high school and graduated from that journalism school. More people have walked on the moon. Did you hear that? More people have walked on the moon than what I just described. However, despite being immensely proud of accomplishing that monstrous feat of accomplishing that, I'm even more proud of writing a book about it. Okay? So even though, more people have walked on the moon than have dropped out of high school and graduated from this particular school, I'm more proud of writing this book about it because it was harder to write the book than actually do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be doing a few more of these. Thank you, Muzza, very much. Hey, Cody, thank you very much. Aloha. No, the states are going to start back up tomorrow, Cody. We're going to have class tomorrow at noon.
Hawaii time. So if you're on the West Coast, then it's going to be 2 o'clock. And if you're on the East Coast, then it's going to be 5 o'clock. So noon Hawaii time. Class starts back up. This week we're going to have class Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll be off New Year's Eve, no class. No class on New Year's Day. And then no class on the 2nd, no class on the 3rd. And then Monday the 4th we'll be back up again. So I just can't stop teaching. I enjoy it. So we'll have another interactive class tomorrow at noon Hawaii time. So it's going to be way earlier than normally. Oh wow, we got almost 20 people in here. Thank you everybody. I hope you enjoyed this book. I'm going to re-upload this onto YouTube. And that was just the first chapter. We're going to be doing more chapters of this as well. There's 10 chapters. Each chapter can be its own short story basically, and that's how I intended it. But I'll also, while you're here, this is some innovative stuff. So I showed you the house that we grew up in. I'll do a quick slideshow of some of the things I was talking about. So this is the house at the beginning of the chapter, Quail Hollow. Oops. And this is the Dairy Queen that I walked to after the fight with my father. And like I said, it was a very lonely. This is inside the Dairy Queen. These are the actual places too. Hopefully damn, I don't have Bear County. Let me show you a couple more. Alright, so I talked about Bear County Jail. It's one of the most dangerous jails in the United States. This is an image of it. I can't believe they sent me there. I'll put it there in a second. So once again, Gonzo Education. It's available on Amazon and also on Walmart.com. Here, let me put the free TTS on. Thank you, Cody, if you're still here. Alright, free TTS is back on. So I hope you guys enjoyed that reading. Show you a shot of Bear County Jail. That's the actual Bear County Jail that when I was 17 I was sent to. I can have that erased from my record. Because, it happened before I was 17. So once again,
Cody 8804 said, "Why did they send you to jail on first misdemeanor offense?"
Well, I actually made a short film about that. They put me on probation originally, but they took me off of probation because while I was on probation, I told the lady that I missed smoking weed and I wanted to continue to smoke weed, and she thought I had a drug problem. Granted, guys, this was in the late 90s, so things were a lot different then. And people, they saw the world differently. So I actually got sent to jail because I said that I planned on smoking weed. And you know what? They also gave me I think they gave me 400 hours of community service, 400 hours of free labor. And I ended up doing 100 hours of free work at that age. And they had me shoveling a ditch, digging a ditch for fucking 8 hours a day for free. And I remember I didn't even have lunch, and one of the guys would sometimes buy me lunch, and it was the best food I ever had after doing that hard work. But I had so many people take advantage of me. I shouldn't have ever been arrested. I shouldn't have ever been charged. It's total bullshit. It's an example of not having parents or any adult guidance, And the only person I had was John Ornalis, which I mentioned in the book. The cover is designed by Michael Brandt. He's also mentioned quite frequently in the book. But yeah, I'm really proud of it. I'm working on the sequel too. Hopefully the sequel will be ready within probably 2022, sometime in 2022. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Special shout out to Cody and Lita and Big Block and Super Roofer and Wyatt. I'm really enthusiastic about the year. I'm going to be doing a lot of positive things, and I won't forget the real ones, that I've mentioned. Mays, Jordan, Muzza, Detroit, Michigan.
Masa __. Said,
you know, I'll remember.
Mr. G 2020.
You guys are my motivation.
Masa _
2021, yes.
Said, GX.
Thank you, Muzza. I have the tools I need to succeed. The past few weeks, this is break time of the year. You know, this is the time at any job or in any schooling, at any level, you want to take the end of the year. They've been doing this for thousands of years. Towards the winter solstice, when the sun, it goes all the way to the sky, but when it starts going to the bottom, that winter sun, when it gets all the way to the bottom, then that's when people celebrate the sun starting over. So,
I did something similar when I was young. I had no idea you didn't have to go to an interview with the police when they asked.
yeah, interesting, Cody. Yeah, I was totally taken advantage of, and they took every penny and ounce of freedom they could from me. And I'll never go back to Texas again. You know, looking back, it's a total example of how, you know, people take advantage of someone that they can take advantage of. At the same time, I was also jumped and robbed so many times.
All you can do is incriminate yourself by talking.
Exactly,
There's
Cody.
literally zero reason to talk to them. Not one positive thing can happen for you, only negative.
Exactly, yeah. So, hope you guys like Irene's shirt, the Cat Lives Matter shirt. You can find that on the internet. She's came up with this Cat Lives Matter with the logo. But yeah, I got a lot planned this year. I'm going to be doing a lot. I'm really enthused about it. I have all the tools I need to succeed, including physically and mentally. I have all the tools that I need to succeed. Everything in my life I've done, I've put myself in this position to succeed. I've worked my ass off, I've studied my ass off, and I've put myself in a position to succeed. So now it's all about just doing it. That's why one of my favorite quotes is 80% of success is just showing up. So this feels really good, just showing up. I did a really great reading there too, but the hardest thing was just showing up, because this stream, it was very close to just not happening, but I had to do it. I just had to do it, you know, because I'm one of those people where you have to be productive or you start getting down, and it's like a snowball effect. So you can go one way or the other way, and so I want this snowball to be a good snowball. I don't want it to snowball in a bad way. I want it to snowball in a good way. So thanks everybody. I'll talk to you guys later. I'm going to re-upload this onto YouTube. And thanks guys. Check out both of my YouTube channels. And I will be live. Class is tomorrow at noon Hawaii time. So that's 2 o'clock on the West Coast and 5 o'clock on the East Coast. Tomorrow we're going to be studying the great state of Iowa. Alright, and that's going to be an hour or 2 hour lecture. Remember, it starts a little earlier. It starts at earlier in the day. 2 o'clock West Coast, 5 o'clock East Coast, and 3 or 4 o'clock in the middle of the country. Alright guys, at midnight in the UK too. I'll talk to you guys later. Everybody have a good end of the year. This is that time of the year that you, like I said,
Next time, Mr. G.
you want to, I'll hope I see you guys to the end of the year. If not, then I'll see you next year. And everybody. But I hope I see you again, because there's still 5 days left in this year. So if I don't see you within the next 5 days, I'll see you guys next year. This is a really great time of the year, so take advantage of it, put things in perspective. We're on the side of good. I got a feeling everybody that's here right now is also good. So we're on the side of good, and remember, that's our jobs here. We need to protect good people and cats and animals and people that can't protect themselves. So thanks you guys. Everybody have a great night, and I'll keep you guys in my prayers, alright? I love you guys. Have a good one. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and everybody, we're on the side of good. We're going to all be saved soon. Love you guys.